All right, so today we're going deep on Lucky Bisht.
Former Indian Secret Service, commando, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, his interview, it was really something.
It grabs you. It really grabs you.
A lot to unpack. So basically, today we're trying to figure out, what shaped this guy.
Right, what made him who he is.
What his experiences were really like.
And what can we learn from it, for ourselves.
Exactly.
And we've got this interview. I mean, it's a pretty good look into, this world most people only see in movies.
Exactly.
So let's start at the beginning. I mean, his childhood wasn't, what you'd expect. For someone who ends up in the Secret Service, born into a military family, you'd think, okay, natural progression. But he wasn't really interested at first.
Not at all. And, it wasn't some sense of duty that pushed him to join up at 16.
No.
Financial need.
Yeah, that really makes you think about what gets people into these, these really demanding fields.
Yeah, definitely. And then it's off to Israel for training,
Yeah.
and things get pretty intense. Sounds like they kind of threw out the rule book for this training.
It was all about being unpredictable, constantly changing things up.
Which, when you think about it, it makes sense. Getting them ready for anything.
Exactly. Throw the plan out the window. You got to be ready.
And it wasn't just about pushing yourself. It was also this buddy pair system he talks about.
Yeah.
You're responsible for your partner's success, too.
Yeah, that adds a whole other level to it. You're not just surviving for yourself.
You're surviving for them, too.
Exactly. Builds teamwork.
Yeah.
Resilience.
Oh, yeah. And he tells this story. Even eating during training, it was a challenge. Covered in dirt,
It was grueling. You really get a sense of, the level of commitment it took just to get through it.
Absolutely. But, Bisht, he obviously had what it took.
Oh, yeah.
And one thing he was known for, his sniper skills.
Incredible. We're talking top 200 in the world.
Wow.
His training involved some really tough exercises, like hitting targets in under 4 seconds, shooting out a candle flame from 100 meters away.
Wow.
He even had to deal with scenarios where there were civilian targets mixed in.
Oh, wow.
That took precision, mental control.
I can't even imagine. But then things take a turn, and he ends up in jail for a double murder. What happened there?
It's a complicated case. Makes you think about, how much we can really know for sure.
Yeah.
He's the main suspect because of this unbelievable shot. 1 bullet, 2 victims. It seemed almost impossible, but then you remember his training. He was trained to make those impossible shots.
So the very skills that made him exceptional, that's what also made him a suspect.
Exactly. At first, the charge was intentional murder, the 302, but it got reduced to culpable homicide not amounting to murder.
Right, 304.
The whole case, it came down to motive.
Whether they could prove he intended to kill.
Yeah.
In the end, he spent 4 years in jail before being released. Really makes you wonder about the justice system.
Big questions, right? About, proof, evidence, what it's like to be accused of something you didn't do.
Absolutely. And then he talks about his time in 11 different prisons. That's got to be a huge contrast from his training.
It's where his story takes a really dark turn. Talking about psychological torture, isolation, denied visitors, constant transfers.
Trying to break him down.
Exactly.
And what were the biggest threats he faced inside?
He talked about 3 main ones: extortion,
Right.
forced labor, even sexual assault.
Wow. It was a constant battle to survive in that kind of place.
It is. And then there was this encounter with a jailer, indirect threats. The whole thing was just tense. You could just feel the power dynamics at play.
You get a sense that even with all his skills, he was vulnerable in that environment.
He was. He had to use his mind, his psychological strength.
To survive.
Yeah.
And he talks about the corruption too, right? Crazy prices for basic necessities, smuggling, VIP treatment for wealthy prisoners.
Paints a pretty grim picture. It's really a system that's got a lot of problems. Overcrowding, lack of accountability. The focus isn't on rehab. It's more like violence and exploitation.
It's a reality check about what happens behind those walls. But thankfully, the story doesn't end there. We get to his time with the Secret Service. It's like stepping into a whole other world.
Totally different. His account of it is fascinating. The planning, the execution, it's all so meticulous.
It starts with information gathering.
Yeah.
Tracing back history, looking at connections, finding weaknesses. It's like a giant puzzle.
They have to understand the target completely. Motivations, fears, vulnerabilities. It's like chess. High-stakes chess.
He even mentions using honey traps to get information.
Right out of a spy movie. But it really makes you think about how far these agencies will go.
The moral lines can get pretty blurry.
They can. Bisht describes one operation. His team had to eliminate a traitor who had sold out 3 Indian agents. It's high risk, high pressure. And then they find all this money on the traitor. It's like karma.
Wow.
It shows that betrayal has consequences. In this world, loyalty and trust, those are everything.
Absolutely.
And even their escape plan, meticulously planned, sticking to land routes to avoid radar, they had to be thinking like the enemy, always one step ahead.
Adaptability, creative thinking, it's all part of it.
You can't just have one plan. You need backups, contingencies.
It's a mental battle, always anticipating the next move. But then, Bisht takes us beyond those individual missions and into the larger geopolitical picture. He doesn't hold back on China and the threat he sees them posing to India.
He's very clear about that. He sees their ambition to control Asia as the biggest danger. He even uses this historical example, the 1955 Kashmir Princess incident, to make his point.
It's not an incident a lot of people know about, but it sounds like a classic example of how China can manipulate things to their advantage.
Exactly. So the plane, it was carrying a Chinese delegation. They were flying from Hong Kong to Jakarta, going to the Bandung Conference. It was this big meeting of newly independent nations, Asian and African nations.
There was a chance for China to really show their influence on the world stage.
Exactly. And then a bomb explodes on the plane. 16 people are killed.
Oh, wow.
At first, the suspicion falls on Taiwan. You know, they were opposed to the People's Republic of China, but the investigation was, well, it was complicated. The Cold War, intelligence agencies, it was a mess.
So what was the motive?
It seems the most likely motive was to assassinate Zhu Enlai, the Chinese premier, disrupt the Bandung Conference.
That would have been a big blow to China.
It would have, but the thing is, he wasn't even on the plane.
So who really benefited from this?
That's the question. Some people think it was the Kuomintang, the ruling party of Taiwan, trying to undermine the People's Republic. Others point to Western intelligence agencies trying to contain communism.
So we may never know for sure who did it.
We may not, but what we do know is China used the incident to their advantage. They presented themselves as victims of terrorism. It boosted their image on the world stage, they got sympathy from other countries, and it further isolated Taiwan.
So even though the attempt failed, it still has a huge impact.
It did, and it shows how something like this can have ripple effects on global politics. You have to look beyond the surface.
Think about the hidden agendas. And speaking of hidden agendas, there's Bisht's encounter with the underworld. He talks about this veiled offer he got from Chodorajan while he was in prison.
Now there's a name that sends shivers down your spine. Chodorajan, a notorious crime lord, connected to politicians, Bollywood, even international terrorism.
It's kind of chilling to think about.
It is. For Rajan to even approach him, it says something about Bist's reputation.
Even in the criminal underworld.
Right. The offer itself, even though it was vague, it suggests that Rajan saw him as a potential asset. He recognized Bist's skills.
It really makes you think about the lines between law enforcement, intelligence, and the criminal world. How blurry they can get.
They can. Bisht's story, it gives us a glimpse into that world. Alliances shift. Motivations aren't always clear. He even talks about the connection between the underworld and politicians. He points to the drop in crime rates during elections.
Suggesting they're working together.
Right.
It's disturbing, but maybe not all that surprising.
Unfortunately not. The idea that criminals can be used for political gain, it's a reminder of how corrupt things can get.
It is. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's go back to Bisht's work protecting VIPs. He explains those different layers of security. The National Security Guard, the NSG, they play a key role providing security for high-profile figures.
Yeah, the NSG, they're responsible for protecting people like a chief minister, people who are constantly under threat.
And their operations involve multiple rings of security, each one with a specific purpose. It's a whole layered defense system.
It is.
It's like a real-life action movie. He even tells a story about having to improvise security for a VIP when the driver disappeared. Talk about thinking on your feet.
It shows you have to be vigilant. You have to think fast.
Even when things seem calm.
Exactly. And then there are all the protocols that VIPs have to follow. Like, they can't even have family members in the same car.
Right?
Those protocols are there for a reason. They're meant to reduce collateral damage if there's an attack. It shows that even in a democracy, some freedoms have to be sacrificed for security. And those security protocols, they're always changing. They're based on the latest intelligence, what's happening around the world.
So it's a constant process of assessment. Adaptation.
Exactly. Stay ahead of the game, anticipate risks, adjust strategies. It's a high-pressure world. It takes a toll, all that pressure.
Yeah, always having to be on guard. The responsibility
Knowing that people's lives are in your hands.
must be incredibly stressful.
It is. And then there's, the moral side of things. Deception, manipulation, sometimes violence. It's not easy.
You realize it's not all glamorous gadgets and missions, like in the movies.
Yeah.
There's a real human cost.
There is. And Bisht's story, it really shows that. He's seen it all, the highs and lows.
And he's willing to share it, which helps us, understand this world a little better. But we haven't talked about what happened after the Secret Service.
Good point. The interview doesn't go into a lot of detail about that, but it does say he became an entrepreneur, continued to find ways to, serve his country.
So even after everything, he still wanted to contribute.
Yeah, there's a real sense of patriotism there, duty. I mean, he faced so much, but he never lost sight of that commitment to India.
It's inspiring. But looking back at everything we've talked about, what stood out to you? What will you remember most?
For me, it's that reminder that truth can be stranger than fiction. His life, all the twists and turns, you couldn't make it up.
He really couldn't.
The way he joined the military, prison, the world of espionage.
It's amazing.
It's about resilience, the human experience, just how complex it all is.
Yeah, we get so caught up in the headlines, the simple stories. His story shows there's always more to it, more to uncover.
Right. And it makes you think critically, question things, look at things from different angles. The world's a complicated place.
It is. So for everyone listening, what does this all mean for you? How does Bisht's story connect with your own life?
One of the big things, I think, is perseverance. The guy faced obstacle after obstacle, but he never gave up. He found a way to get through it all, come out stronger.
The training, prison, the moral dilemmas of his work, he never lost sight of what he wanted to achieve.
It reminds us that even when things seem impossible, there's a way forward. You just have to find that strength inside you. Don't let circumstances defeat you.
And it's not just about individual strength either. He talks about teamwork, relying on others, supporting them.
That's huge, especially now when everything's about individual success. He reminds us that we can do so much more together.
Support each other, combine our strengths.
Exactly. And thinking about his time in the Secret Service, he really emphasized adaptability, creative thinking.
That's important no matter what you do. But in a world that's always changing, where the stakes are so high, it's essential.
He had to improvise, come up with solutions when things went wrong.
You can't always stick to the plan. Sometimes you have to think outside the box. Adapt.
Right. And it's not just about reacting, it's about anticipating, having backup plans like he did with the escape routes, always thinking ahead.
Be prepared, but also be flexible. That's a good lesson for anything. Work, relationships, just everyday life.
Absolutely. Something I find really powerful about Bisht is his willingness to, speak truth to power. He doesn't shy away from tough topics.
The corruption in prison, the threats he sees to India. He says what he thinks, even if it's not popular.
It's a good reminder that we all have a voice, and we should use it, even if it means challenging the way things are or speaking up against what's wrong.
It takes guts to do that. But his story shows it can make a difference, even if it's just raising awareness, starting a conversation.
And those conversations are so important. We're overwhelmed with information, different perspectives. We have to think critically, figure out what's true, talk about the things that matter.
That's how we start to understand each other. That's where progress comes from. Listening, learning, having those discussions.
And I think Bisht's story can really get those conversations going. It makes you question what you think you know, expands your perspective.
It makes you look at the world differently. Well said. I think that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Lucky Bisht's life.
It's been an amazing journey, learning about all the different parts of his story, getting a look into a world most of us will never see.
And to everyone listening, we hope this has made you curious, inspired you to think about the world in new ways.
Bisht's story shows that truth can be found in the most unexpected places, and that even ordinary people can live extraordinary lives.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, keep looking for the truth, wherever it leads you.
It's been great talking about this with you.
It really has. You don't often get this kind of look behind the scenes. Hear from someone who's lived a life like this.
You don't. And that sense of duty, it just runs through everything he does.
It does. Even when he joined the military, it was for the money at first, but it turned into something more, something bigger.
Yeah, it did. And that commitment to service, it stayed with him his whole career, even his business ventures later on. It makes you think, what is it that drives a person like that?
I think it's got to be a belief in something bigger than himself,
Yeah.
contributing to something meaningful. That's something we can all take away from this, no matter what we do in life.
It is. It's finding that purpose, making a difference.
And it doesn't have to be these huge gestures. It's the small things. Being there for people, working hard, volunteering.
Those everyday things, finding ways to contribute.
And looking back at what we've learned about Bisht, I mean, he just changed you. You can't underestimate the human spirit.
No, you can't. He went through so much, the training, prison, but he never let it break him. He used it to become stronger.
He's proof that we can overcome anything, that we can learn and grow from tough experiences.
We all have that strength. Deep down, it's about tapping into it, finding a way forward, even when things are uncertain.
So for everyone listening, we hope you've not just learned about Lucky Bisht's life, but also come away with some hope, a sense of possibility.
His story shows what the human spirit can do. Overcome challenges, find purpose, even when things are tough.
It reminds us that we're all capable of amazing things, that we can all make a difference.
Sometimes you just need a spark, a story of courage, of resilience to light that fire inside you.
So thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of Lucky Bisht. We hope you've enjoyed it.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep believing in what people can do.